Here we are with the Sony Xperia 5. Now, you're probably wondering why this phone? I mean, it's almost 2025 and we're in a world packed with foldables, flippables, heck, maybe even a holographic device or two. So, what's the point of talking about this not so popular phone? Well, here's the kicker. There's something about this unassuming phone that really set it apart. It might not have dominated headlines, sure, but Sony had a clear vision with this one. And in a way, it was designed to punch way above its weight. So, picture this. Back in 2019, Sony found itself in a bit of a tech paradox. While everyone else was racing to make screens bigger, splashier, and packed with every gimmick you could imagine, Sony did something bold. They scaled back. With the Xperia 5, they aimed for an ultra-compact, high-quality device, knowing they weren't the biggest player in the smartphone game anymore. But their focus, display, and camera. They weren't aiming for a mass-market hit. They were going after an audience that still cared about the details. People who wanted their phone to feel like a personal, powerful tool, not just a mini entertainment center. And that's where things get interesting. Sony's mindset was basically, hey, if you're serious about content, if you're really into photography, filmmaking, or just a killer visual experience, we've got a phone for you. And remember, this was the same Sony that was cranking out top-notch camera sensors for just about every major phone on the market. Apple, Samsung, you name it. So, with the Xperia 5, they decided to keep that edge for themselves. Meanwhile, Samsung and Apple, they were doubling down on the whole ecosystem game. But Sony, they said, nah, we are good, and lean into a niche. A niche for those who might be a little different. Because, let's face it, if you were buying an Xperia 5, you weren't the type who wanted the same phone everyone else had. And looking back, did it work? Well, kinda. It didn't exactly give Sony a huge slice of the market, but it did carve out a spot with tech enthusiasts. I mean, think about it. The OLED display, that sweet 21:9 aspect ratio, even that snappy shutter button. These are the little things that really set it apart. But here's the deal with my unit. It's the Japanese Docomo variant and wow, this thing came loaded with so much bloatware, it's almost impressive in the worst way. I mean, what even is all of this? Apps are piled up like a junk drawer. Half of them are either obscure or downright useless. A McDonald's app? Cool, I guess, if I want Big Mac delivery on speed dial, but this is bloat taken to the next level. Now, thankfully, if you've got the patience, there are ways to clean this thing up. You can uninstall most of the nonsense, or better yet, go all in with a debloater tool to really wipe the slate clean. And once you do that, it's like clearing the fog. The Xperia 5 finally feels like the phone it was meant to be. Smooth, focused, actually usable. Now, the Xperia 5's camera setup, it's pure Sony. 3 cameras, a main, telephoto, and ultra-wide. But the kicker? It's in the software. Sony wanted this to be a creator's phone, so you get dedicated apps like Cinema Pro, which gives you that pro-level video setup filmmakers go wild for. You can control everything, from frame rates to focus pulls, really dialing it in. But here's the truth. While the tools are top-notch, the quality, it doesn't exactly blow you away. Video can be a bit shaky, but it's crisp. And photos, they're not the wow type, but they're solid. Good detail, decent color accuracy, but in low light, not jaw-dropping. Now, the front camera, pretty standard. It does the job, but it's not going to make your selfies pop like an influencer's. But let's talk about the display, where the Xperia 5 really shines in that signature Sony way. This isn't your average screen. It's a 6.1-inch OLED with Sony's daring 21:9 aspect ratio. You might think it's just tall and narrow, but that cinematic aspect ratio, it's perfect for multitasking. Splitting the screen between apps is surprisingly fluid, and with this form factor, each app has room to breathe. Watching movies or widescreen content, gorgeous. Blacks are rich, colors are punchy yet natural. It's immersive. One standout feature? The dedicated camera button. You press it and boom, the camera's ready to go. It's like Sony knew exactly what photographers wanted. This button alone makes you want to take pictures. It's tactile, responsive, and honestly, pretty satisfying to use. Then, there's the fingerprint sensor right there on the side. It feels natural in the hand, but It's kind of finicky. It works most of the time, but sometimes it just decides to take a little coffee break. Not a deal breaker, but it can take the wind out of that smooth experience. Now, one thing Sony nailed: the build quality. It's great. The glossy black finish, yeah, it's a fingerprint magnet, but it's stunning. The feel in hand, top notch. It's slim, premium, and solid. And for a phone this narrow, social media is a breeze. Scrolling, tapping, typing, it all just flows. Under the hood, with a Snapdragon 855, it's held up surprisingly well for its age. You're not running the latest games at max settings, but for regular use and even some mid-tier gaming, it's still smooth, reliable, and quick to respond. The processor is efficient, the screen gives you loads of room, and the device stays pretty cool. Now, about the battery. Fast forward to 2025, and yeah, you might feel the strain. It was decent back in the day, but now, let's just say you'll want a power bank on standby if you're a heavy user. Now, here's something I genuinely appreciate: the SIM tray. No tool needed here, just pull it out with your fingers. It's a small detail, but it adds a lot of convenience. And here's a curious choice: no headphone jack. I know, right? Sony was one of the last brands holding on to the audio jack, but with the Xperia 5, they let it go. Not necessarily a deal breaker, but for a phone that prides itself on pro-grade audio and video, it feels a bit off. Then there's SideSense, Sony's way of making a tall, narrow phone more usable. In theory, it's genius. You tap or swipe along the edge to pull up shortcuts, recent apps, and more. In practice, it's hit or miss. It works, but not with the precision you'd hope for. Half the time, you're swiping and getting nowhere. Let's just say it's a great idea, but the execution could use some polish. Now, here's the downside of a niche phone. Updates have dried up. Sony kept it going for a while, but here in 2025, the Xperia 5 isn't exactly getting a lot of love. If you're someone who needs the latest features, it might sting a bit. We're running Android 11 here, which may sound outdated, but thanks to an update from Android 15, we've got theft protection. And look, it's not that Sony didn't want to compete, they just chose to play a different game. The Xperia 5 might look like a relic now, but back then, it was Sony's way of reminding the industry that smaller, more intentional tech can still make an impact. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.